Sorry, there's so much wind here. It's blowing everything around. I have one of those like plastic little windy house storage units outside, and the whole thing, it was leaning up against a wall. I don't even know how it blew over, but it did earlier. So if the wind is noisy, I do apologize. Right, let's jump into a screen share so I can talk to you about seeing the nodes in your chart. But just before we do that, oh my God, now my dog's going to bark. Just before we do that, I want to show you the other. There we go. Oh my goodness, I'm having some kind of. Okay, right. I'm still recording and I'm still sharing. It was doing some weird stuff there. Okay, the lunar nodes. So this is the little sheet that I've done where everywhere else it's on the planets. This one does look a little bit different because of the nature of this situation we're looking at. The nodes is not being a physical body in the sky, but rather a sensitive point that we spoke of in the last recording. Okay, so this little funny like upside down kind of stylized N is the south node. So you can just think of down south, and this little stylized upward facing N. So I suppose they would look like a U, but I think of them as N's, upside down N and right way up N because of nodes. And this one you can think of as north because it is facing up. Shortened version of them, if you're reading any other literature on them, is often SN, south node, or NN, north node. Okay, so one of the ways I have just done it here is we would call the south node fate to the north node's destiny, the south node's karma to the north node's dharma. And just to say, karma is what we come in with, so sort of like we discussed in the last thing. Karma is what our soul has experienced. So karma isn't always bad. You know, we often will hear somebody go, well, that's karma, or well, karma is going to come around. Well, karma does come around, but sometimes karma is good karma. Good karma comes around, you know, as frequently as bad karma, if that's the work that you've done over lifetimes. So karma, and then dharma is our highest potential. So the idea is that our north node, doing the work of our north node, leads us to our highest potential, what our soul is wanting to learn. Then I've said cultivated over lifetimes versus wild and untamed, and what comes naturally versus what takes learning and work, because we may not even realize, and this is where you're gonna, when you understand your south node, you go, oh, well, that's why that's always so easy for me. I didn't realize that some people can't do that. For me, that's just a thing I do easily. Versus the north node, which is, oh, I'd rather not do that. So oftentimes we don't really want to cultivate our north node because it's a little bit harder to do, because it's like, if you can't read, you have to learn to read, and it's hard. So you get lazy. How many times have you seen children not wanting to do their reading practice because it's hard, and they stutter and stumble until they learn how? Whereas if you're naturally good at something, it's so much more fun to do. And actually, I think you can really see this in children, you know, who are still quite just well, certainly my children. I mean, where they are naturally good, they just want to do that. And where they struggle, they want to avoid. And that's kind of the essence of the nodes. So this is where we really need to dig deep and do the north node work. Okay, and then I've said here, just as little reminders, they are always opposite one another. It's an axis that we will dance between for our whole lives, and it's linked to the eclipses. Okay, so that's your one sheet. Then here's your nodal story. This also looks a little bit different. So you're going to say your south node sign, and then what I want you to do is just write whatever you think about your south node sign. So for example, with me, my south node is in Pisces. So I'm going to look at my Pisces cheat sheet, you know, the archetype one. Hang on, we have to go right down to the, oops, oh dear, go down to the bottom for that one. We're going to look at all the Pisces things, and we're going to think, well, Pisces is water, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces, there it is the mystic, it's idealistic, romantic, trusting. I mean, as I read that, I just think how being trusting and idealistic is part of my problem. And I mean, look at that. We can say, because I'm so trusting and idealistic, and I have bad boundaries, and I can get stuck into the illusion. I got stuck into an addictive relationship. Like, I mean, I already can just say, and maybe I did that because I've done that for lifetimes, because we're talking about my south node now, right? So already I can sort of see where I could go with that in terms of what I want to put in here. My south node being in Pisces means I could be experiencing these types of things really easily. Then my North Node being in the sign of, in my case, Virgo means, and then again, just to quickly pop you back, you're going to go back to the Virgo sign and see what things resonate for you there. And so it's really saying it's time for me to put some work in at getting organized and have routine and ritual to ground myself. And it's an earth sign. So where the Pisces was saying not so great with boundaries, theoretically, if I'm doing my earth work, if I'm ticking my boxes on my list, which Virgo loves, then you're going to say, okay, well, now I am more grounded and more contained and have better boundaries because I know what is expected. I can work with that. This is going to be further exacerbated for me with where I have it in my chart, specifically for my story, as I'm trying to point out now, because when I go to, here we go. So for me, the South Node is in my 7th house of relationships, and the North Node is in my 1st house of me. So I need to work on the North Node stuff. I need to work on my self-identity, which means I need to have better boundaries. I need to be more structured and organized in myself. I need to learn how to not always defer to the other, the 7th house where my South Node is, not always put the other's needs above my own, not always fall for the other's stories and issues in order to support the other. I need to come back home. I need to do my work. I need to get organized in my life. I need to rest on my own spine, on my own bones, ground into my own choices and decision making, versus when I'm looking at the 7th house of I come in with lifetimes of understanding, being a mystic, being a psychic, all the work I do. This stuff is natural for me. It comes naturally to me. Sometimes people are like, how do you remember all that? Or how do you know all that? And I think, I don't know how I know. So, I mean, I learn all the time. I'm constantly learning. Let's just jump to my chart while I say this. Here we go. Okay, so unfortunately, oopsie, if you use AstroSeek, AstroSeek will show you the South Node as well. But with Astro, wait, have I got that right? Yeah, with astro.com or AstroDienst, which is the ones that I've sent you, they only draw on the North Node. But if you already know that the South Node is exactly opposite, and you know what the sign opposite is, which you will be able to see. Oh gosh, no, I didn't put the sign opposite there, did I? But house-wise, you'll be able to recognize. So we know 1st house is opposite 7th house. So Virgo is opposite Pisces. So my North Node, and you can see it's got a little T there. That means true node, but anyway, don't worry too much about that. There's a true node and a mean node, depending which site you're using. It might give you a different thing, but it's usually not much difference. So don't panic about that. We are not being ridiculously pedantic, in spite of the fact that this is in Virgo for me, which is a pretty pedantic sign. So we're going to say, okay, my North Node is in the 1st house in Virgo, therefore directly opposite it in the 7th house at 11 degrees and 44 minutes of Pisces is going to be my South Node. So we can see there that I come in with this ease. I've studied and studied and studied over lifetimes, but I'm still studying. And yet there are so many times when people say to me, wow, how did you remember that? Or how do you know that? And then I think, well, I'm not quite sure. Did I study that through someone? Did I hear that in a lecture? I mean, maybe, but a lot of the time things just come out through me, more through me as a channel, which is also Pisces. And I don't always know how I know. Or I learn something really quickly because it's in my wheelhouse of lifetimes of doing. So it doesn't, you know, you might take that information and let's say you have a North Node in a South Node in Taurus, and you're much more practical and you can't learn this mysticism stuff. It's like, I don't get it because I've got a lifetime behind me of concrete, practical. I can understand the logistics of building a pyramid, but I cannot understand this mysticism woo-woo stuff. It's the other way for me because I have a South Node in Pisces. I don't know how I understand it. I don't know why I understand it, but I understand it. And now I do know because I have a South Node in Pisces. And also because in my case, that's in the 7th house. We're going to say that I also have a lifetime of working in relationship with others. And maybe you could say, naturally, I have been a counselor, which again is something that comes easily to me. I'm naturally a counselor. I'm naturally a therapist. I naturally work one-on-one or in group environments. I've learned skills. I've done courses and I've learned skills to help me have better boundaries at doing that. That I don't have naturally. Well, maybe that's not the right way to say it. That I have to work a little harder on. There's plenty of things I have to work on, but some people never have an intuitive feel in a connection in therapy sort of type settings. There's just no intuitive connection. And for me, that's just easy. I don't actually have any planets in Pisces, but I do have this South Node. So on this other side of the spectrum, I have the North Node. And I do have a planet here. I have a planet of karma here, and we are going to cover Saturn. No, it's a little while before we cover Saturn. I think we're going to cover Saturn in Capricorn season because he's the ruler of Capricorn. So we've got a while for that. But in my case, they're conjunct, which means that they're right next to each other. So they're kind of inextricably influencing one another, because it's like the Saturn went into the same room as this sensitive thing happened. And there's a feeling of, when something big happens, where a baby is born in a room or somebody has died in a room, and you might not have known that, but when you go in, there's a feeling in the room. That's kind of like the nodes, because they aren't a person walking into the room, but there's an energy residue there. There is something that you can't see or fully understand, but you can absolutely feel. And that's kind of what the node is. So Saturn, who's the planet of karma as well, in my case, this is I have demanded from my soul the double whammy of forcing me to do the karmic work, because maybe I would rather be the mystic. It's easier for me to be the mystic. I want to be the mystic that sits in a little hut in the wood. And I have had some past life regression moments where this literally was my life. And I want to hide away, Pisces. And if you find me, I will work for you. I will work with you. But I don't want a lot of people around. I don't want to be like famous. Like that's more comfortable for me. So this lifetime, I decided to be a Leo rising, who's like, give me the fame and the glory, put me on a stage and I'll be fine. Not what my South Node is used to. My lifetimes are used to. And then I've also got this very strong karmic work needing to be done. That is me, first house. I have got to get more structured. I have to do my own work. I have to become the queen of my queendom, and I have to teach that mysticism in a practical, grounded way. I need to take what I know, and it's kind of exactly what I'm doing right here. I'm trying to do my Saturn work, I'm trying to do my North Node work, but in order for me to do that, I have to understand myself. I have to work on myself. I have to get clearer in myself every single day. Virgo, every single day. Healthy habits, daily kind of routines and rituals that work for the betterment of me so that I can serve other, rather than the other way around, which comes more naturally, which is how I became an enabler in a long-term addictive marriage, amongst other things, is that it's easier and more comfortable for me to be the victim of the other. If I want to take it into the deeper negative aspects of Pisces energy, I can say that I allow myself to be victimized and martyr myself to others. And that I can absolutely see that to be true for me if I'm not paying good attention, because I don't have good boundaries, because I'm trying to be compassionate and kind, because I can see beyond the person's behavior to the wounded child in them, to the clear and beautiful soul in them. And therefore, I want to just keep holding and supporting them, even if it kills me. Like that's where Virgo goes, don't be bloody ridiculous. You can't let it kill you. What can you do to sustain yourself? And as in we're talking about the eclipse season, because now this eclipse cycle that we're in now would have hit me here. It was like, sorry, you've got to get out. You've got to get out of this pattern. You've got to change the pattern. So that eclipse season that we're in is actually sort of linking into my nodes are in angular houses from when I was born. So they were always going to be an intense place of karmic work for me and other, first house, and seventh house. The current eclipse season has been basically squaring that in the other two fundamental houses that we look at, which is the 4th and the 9th, and the 10th, sorry, 4th and 10th. So even though you can see Taurus is mainly my 9th house, it's the ruler of my 9th house, but it's also just the ruler of my 10th house, 28 degrees. So it has 2 degrees in the 10th house, but it rules my 10th house. So same for Scorpio, it's the ruler of my 3rd house, covers my whole 3rd house, and it is the ruler of my 10th house. So sometimes the eclipses that we've just had would have actually fallen, strictly speaking, most of them would have fallen on my 9th and 3rd house, but they were ruling not my 9th and 3rd house and my 4th and 10th house. And literally I can see both of those things and how they have certainly evolved. I mean, I have had to choose to immerse myself in the community of Grahamstown in a way that I could feel I was resistant to doing before. And that's been through this process. So that's community, neighbors, neighborhood, leaning into siblings and friends and cousins in a much better way for support than I maybe would have before, when I was keeping everything secret and hiding. And also the 4th house, literally, obviously my home environment, life has changed with divorce, separation, finding a cottage in Grahamstown. Most of you have been with me for some of this journey, so it's not for most of this journey, I guess. So it's not a surprise to you, and you can kind of see how that plays out. And then the same thing, it's been, because most of it's happened in my 9th house, we can say that's very much my spiritual growth and evolution, which has catapulted, since I'm no longer trying to keep myself small to be able to kind of hide behind Chris and his demons while I try and hold him up, or I'm like the under the water paddling and trying to hold him up while he breathes and I'm drowning. And that was a choice that I made, not always consciously, but obviously it was a choice that I made to keep doing that, which is very South Node in Pisces. But I've undergone this transformation where I'm like, okay, I can't do that anymore. I need to breathe. I need to come to the top of the chart. I can't be under the water. I need to float up. And as I've floated up, and as I'm being able to breathe, and through doing the work of grieving, not burying the feelings, not numbing them, not doing all those things. I mean, sometimes, obviously, but mostly I'm working really consciously on this and on myself, North Node, not worry. Well, it took me a long time, and I still struggle sometimes, to change the narrative to, I wonder if he's okay. I wonder how he's coping, before looking at myself. Now it's how am I coping? And then if something shows up, I might still contemplate how he's doing. Sorry. I just needed a sip. So that's been a big shift. So you can see that I have let myself release some of my South Node and step deeper into my North Node. And I mean, I'm actually also in Saturn opposition now, because Saturn is coming through Pisces, which is opposite my, well, it's going to, so it's with my North Node, it's a South Node, and opposite my Saturn. So that's another nod. So we layer things on. We're not talking about Saturn specifically today, so I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's like another nod to, this is inevitable, what I'm going through. There are days, what I have been going through, what I still am going through, but there's been a big shift for me, but from the last Taurus eclipse, actually, which happened exactly on this point, 28 degrees of Taurus. That is exactly where the last eclipse was. That is where I had the shock of finding out that Chris actually was with somebody else. It was 2 weeks after the Scorpio eclipse, in which I moved into this house, this cottage. 2 weeks later, the second eclipse, they were both Mars ruled, so a little bit aggressive almost, you might say. And well, actually, that wasn't an eclipse. I apologize. That one wasn't an eclipse. We had a 29-degree Aries eclipse. That one was new moon, wasn't an eclipse, but it was the first non-eclipse Taurus lunation for the last while. So it was still very linked to the eclipse cycle, because the North Node is still in Taurus. And it was that breaking point for me, where I just went, it's almost like I woke up and went, what the hell? What have I been thinking? What have I been doing? What have I not been seeing? You know, so a huge coming to the light. Because if you think about it, this is the height of the light in a chart, and this is the depth of the night in a chart. Okay. So, and this would be summer. You could almost look at that as the summer solstice point and the winter solstice point and the equinox points, if we were to try and give it a directional feel. I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to say about how this kind of works. I mean, obviously, you can sit and look at a chart and I could say a million different things about it. But as the nodes are moving, they're literally going to move into the last degree of Aries and into the last degree. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. And you'll see it here in... Oh. Okay, so now it says here, South node, I've just done SN, karma. North node, dharma. So I have cultivated, and then I want you to again go and say, okay, so for me, let's say South node, karma in Pisces, I have cultivated mysticism and magic and intuition over lifetimes. You can make this as elaborate as you want to. North node, dharma, I am cultivating boundaries, practicality, detailed productivity, sacred routines and rituals on a daily basis. You know, I could say many different things there. Then you're going to say planets conjunct the nodes or planets square the nodes. Oh, I'm glad I remembered that because that's important. Okay, so in my case, planet conjunct the node. So that you can just say south node, nothing, or you, if there's nothing with your south node, as there isn't for me, then you just don't write it. Or then you say north node, NN, conjunct. And the way you draw conjunction is a little circle and a line going up. If you want to start working with the glyphs, it's just a circle and a slightly diagonal lollipop line. Wait, I'll show you. Lemon thing. Where's a conjunction? Here. See there where my little mouse is? That's a conjunction. That is an opposition. Okay. So if you have anything conjunct, so for me, Saturn is conjunct my north node, which means it's opposed to my south node. So you could write that. Okay, you could write that if you wanted to. Anyway, so it's going to be Saturn conjunct. Then when I've said squares, let me just go back there and say planets square the nodes. The area square the nodes is often called the bends or the bendings. So it's at 90-degree points. And these are also quite pertinent. If you have a planet square the nodes, it's usually linked also to a karmic process for you. So we might see here that for me, because what is square to Pisces and Virgo, mutable signs, Gemini and Sag. And Gemini has got an 8-degree Venus square the nodes. So in my case, I'm going to say Venus in Gemini square the nodes. I don't have, this is too far off. I wouldn't go that far. I would say you can go up to 3 to 5 degrees in each direction. So 8, 9, 10, 11 is 3 degrees. Maybe if it was 7, I'd still call it. Feel it for yourself, okay? The orb that we would look at in astrology is different for different astrologers. And different, like nodes might get smaller, tighter orbs in some people's belief. I kind of think the whole thing that I want people to leave my kind of astrology practice with is, well, what do you feel? Like, I know that Saturn and my North Node are very inextricably bound to one another. And I absolutely would call this 8 degree to be a square to the nodes. Venus is definitely something that is starting to show me more recently as I've become more embodied with my Venus understandings. Venus and Mars have both been showing me some really, really big, important sort of deeper karmic connections on various levels. And Venus being square my nodes, it's time. I've activated that now. Maybe I didn't earlier in my life, or maybe I didn't consciously. That doesn't mean it wasn't something playing out in the background of my life, but more consciously now, I've begun to activate and be ready to integrate the lessons of Venus square my nodes. And Mars, it's where the eclipses have been really impacting now. That's very much activated that process also for me a different karmic process, a different activation, which in effect ends up activating Venus and Mars for me on a very karmic dharmic way at a point in my life where I'm releasing the other in terms of my relationship and having to find that inner Venus and Mars in a much more grounded, embodied way in order to fully come into myself, in order to hopefully, if I go into another relationship, do it differently, if that all makes sense. So again, that's going a little deeper, but that's what I want you to look for here. Planets conjunct the nodes, and anything conjunct one node will be opposite the other, and planets square the nodes, and anything square the one node will be square the other, because it's bang in the middle. And there's two sides, there's another axis. So in my case, Virgo Pisces, that means Gemini, Sagittarius are going to be square the nodes. So that is a lot on nodes. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. I super duper look forward to us having a Zoom call. Going to get this out a little while before, so you have some time to do the work on it. And then Cancer New Moon, honoring the moon herself and her beautiful, gentle nodes. We will dive into your unfolding of your lunar node story. So I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for watching.